Retirement is supposed to be a celebration or reward for decades of hard work, a chance to finally exhale and enjoy the fruits of a life well lived. That's what everyone kept telling me as they gathered in the softly lit banquet hall, raising their glasses in my honor. My husband beamed at me from across the room. My son hovered protectively nearby, and my grandchildren darted between tables, their laughter echoing off the walls. Balloons bobbed above the crowd, and the scent of roses, my favorite, drifted from every centerpiece. On the surface, it was perfect. But beneath the laughter and the clinking glasses, I felt something else. A quiet, persistent tension, like a thread pulled too tight. Maybe it was just nerves, I told myself. After all, it's not every day you close a chapter that's defined you for so long. But as I watched my daughter-in-law Emily glide through the crowd with her practiced smile, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She'd always been polite, even charming, but there was a distance in her eyes tonight, a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. I tried to brush it aside, focusing on the speeches and the toasts, but my mind kept circling back to her. I wish I could say I was imagining things, that my intuition was just playing tricks on me. But as the night unfolded, I would discover just how right and how wrong I was. What happened at my retirement party changed everything I thought I knew about my family. And if you think you know how this story ends, trust me, you'll want to stay until the very last word. Looking back, my life was built on a foundation of hard work and quiet sacrifice. I started my career as a young woman in a male-dominated office, determined to prove myself. I worked late nights, missed school, plays, and poured every ounce of energy into building a life for my family. My husband, Mark, was supportive in his own way, but it was my son, Daniel, who became my anchor. From the moment he was born, I felt a bond with him that was deeper than words. He was the child who would sit at the kitchen table with me, asking about my day, who'd bring me wildflowers from the backyard, who'd hug me tight when the world felt too heavy. I always told myself that all the sacrifices were worth it if it meant giving him a better life. As Daniel grew, so did my hopes for our family. I dreamed of Sunday dinners, grandchildren running through the house, and a daughter-in-law who would become the daughter I never had. When Daniel brought Emily home for the first time, I was determined to welcome her with open arms. She was beautiful, poised, and intelligent. Perfect match for my son. Or so I thought. I remember fussing over the dinner table, making sure everything was just right, wanting her to feel at home. I offered her my favorite recipes, invited her to family traditions, and even gave her a cherished heirloom necklace on her wedding day. I wanted her to know she belonged. At first, things seemed promising. Emily was gracious, always quick with a thank you, and she made an effort to fit in. But as the months turned into years, I began to notice small shifts. She started declining invitations, citing work or exhaustion. She'd sit quietly at family gatherings, her smile polite but never quite reaching her eyes. Daniel assured me she was just shy, that she needed time to adjust. But I couldn't help but feel a growing distance. I tried harder, offering help, with the kids, sending thoughtful texts, even defending her when other relatives whispered about her aloofness. I wanted so badly for us to be close, to have the kind of relationship I'd always imagined. But reality rarely matches our expectations. The more I tried, the more Emily seemed to pull away. She'd make decisions about the children without consulting me, or she'd subtly undermine my suggestions in front of Daniel. There were moments when I caught her watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher, something between annoyance and pity. I told myself it was just the stress of young motherhood, that she'd come around in time. But deep down, I felt the sting of rejection, the ache of being on the outside of my own family. The hardest part was watching Daniel caught in the middle. He loved us both, and I could see the strain it put on him. He'd try to smooth things over, insisting that everything was fine, but I knew better. Our once-easy conversations became stilted, filled with careful pauses and unspoken words. I missed the days when he'd confide in me, when our home felt warm and full of laughter. Now there was a chill I couldn't ignore. I clung to the hope that things would improve, that time would heal whatever rift had formed. I told myself that my retirement would be a new beginning, a chance to bring everyone together, to finally bridge the gap. But as I stood in that banquet hall watching Emily from across the room, I realized that some distances can't be closed by sheer willpower. And as much as I wanted to believe in happy endings, I was about to learn just how fragile family ties could be. It's strange how the smallest things can start to feel enormous when you're already on edge. In the weeks leading up to my retirement party, I found myself noticing every little detail, every offhand comment, every sideways glance. Emily had always been reserved, but lately her distance felt sharper, almost intentional. She'd arrive late to family dinners, barely touch her food, and excuse herself early, always with a vague apology about work or the kids. I tried to brush it off, telling myself not to take it personally, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. One afternoon, I stopped by their house to drop off a box of old toys for the grandchildren. I rang the bell, expecting the usual chaos of little feet and laughter, but the house was oddly quiet. Emily opened the door, her expression tight. "Oh, I didn't realize you were coming by," she said, her voice clipped. I smiled, trying to keep things light. Just thought I'd bring these over for the kids. They loved them when Daniel was little. She took the box without meeting my eyes and mumbled a thank you before closing the door a little too quickly. I stood on the porch for a moment, the sting of her dismissal settling in my chest. It wasn't just the cold welcomes. At family gatherings, I'd catch her rolling her eyes when I offered advice or see her whispering to Daniel in the kitchen, their heads bent close together. Once I overheard her say she means well, but she just doesn't know when to stop. The words hit me like a slap. I wanted to believe she was talking about something else, but the look on Daniel's face told me otherwise. He looked tired, caught between loyalty and frustration, and I hated that I was the cause of that tension. The closer we got to the party, the more I felt like an outsider in my own family. Emily took over the planning, insisting on handling every detail. "You've done enough. Let us take care of this," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I tried to be gracious, to let her have her way, but it felt like I was being pushed aside. When I offered to help with the guest list or the menu, she'd smile tightly and say, "Don't worry, I've got it." I told myself she was just trying to be helpful, but the exclusions stung. Then there were the little things that didn't add up. I'd find my favorite serving dish missing after a dinner, only to see it later in Emily's kitchen. She'd forget to invite me to school events or send me last-minute texts about changes in plans. Each slight was small on its own, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. I started to question myself. Was I being too sensitive? Was I imagining things? But the unease grew, gnawing at me in quiet moments. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction, searching for clues, for some explanation that would make sense of the growing distance. I wanted so badly to believe that it was all in my head, that Emily was just overwhelmed or stressed, but a part of me knew better. There was something she wasn't saying, something simmering beneath the surface. The day of the party, I arrived early to help set up, hoping to bridge the gap. Emily was already there, directing the caterers with brisk efficiency. When I offered to help, she handed me a stack of napkins and said, "Just fold these, please." Her tone was polite but dismissive, as if I were a guest in my own celebration. I tried to make conversation, but she barely responded, her attention fixed on her phone as the guests began to arrive. I caught a glimpse of Emily in the hallway, speaking in hushed tones to someone on the phone. "No, she has no idea," I heard her say, her voice low and urgent. My heart skipped a beat. Was she talking about me? I strained to hear more, but she ended the call abruptly when she saw me watching. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. By the time the party was in full swing, my nerves were frayed. I wanted to enjoy the moment, to celebrate with my family, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every laugh felt forced, every toast tinged with unease. I tried to focus on the good, the hugs from my grandchildren, the kind words from old friends, but Emily's presence loomed over everything. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I needed to let go and trust my family. But as the night wore on, the tension only grew. I could feel it in the way Daniel avoided my gaze, in the way Emily watched me from across the room. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew deep down that the night would not end the way I'd hoped. And as I raised my glass for one final toast, I couldn't help but wonder what secrets were hiding behind those polite smiles. It's funny, How a single moment can split your life in two before and after. One minute I was standing by the dessert table, listening to my colleagues reminisce about office pranks and late-night deadlines. The next I was watching my daughter-in-law, Emily, out of the corner of my eye, her movements oddly deliberate as she hovered near the drinks. The room was buzzing with laughter and music, but suddenly, all I could hear was the thud of my own heartbeat. I just set my glass of sparkling cider down on the table, distracted by a friend who wanted a photo. When I turned back, I saw Emily, standing there, her back to me, her hand moving quickly over the rim of my glass. It was subtle, so subtle that if I hadn't been watching her so closely all evening, I might have missed it entirely. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes darting around the room, then slipped something from her palm into the drink. My breath caught in my throat. For a split second, I wondered if I was imagining things, if my anxiety had finally gotten the best of me. But the look on her face, nervous, calculating, told me this was no accident. I froze, my mind racing. What could she possibly be doing? Was it a joke? A prank? Or something far more sinister? I tried to steady my hands as I approached the table, forcing a smile when she turned to face me. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough for her to notice. She smiled too wide and nodded. "Of course, just making sure you have everything you need." Her eyes flicked to the glass, then back to me. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. But the room was full of people, my friends, my family, my grandchildren. I couldn't make a scene. Not here, not now. So I did the only thing I could think of. I waited until Emily was distracted by a guest, then quietly reached for my glass. My hands shook as I picked it up. But instead of taking a sip, I set it down next to another identical glass that someone else had left behind. I switched their positions, making sure no one was watching, and picked up the untouched drink. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure someone would notice. I tried to act normal, chatting with guests and posing for photos, but my mind was spinning. What had Emily put in my drink? Was I overreacting? I watched her out of the corner of my eye, saw her glance at the table, then at me, her expression tightening when she realized I'd switched glasses. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw something flicker across her face, fear, maybe, or anger. She quickly looked away, but the damage was done. I knew, and she knew I knew. The rest of the party passed in a blur. I barely tasted the cake. Barely. Heard the speeches. Every time someone raised a glass, I felt a jolt of panic. I watched as Emily, perhaps thinking she was safe, picked up the glass I'd left behind and took a sip. She hesitated just for a second, then forced a smile and joined a group of guests. I tried to read her face to see if anything was wrong, but she was as composed as ever. Inside, I was unraveling. My mind raced with questions. What if I was wrong? What if I just imagined the whole thing? But the memory of her hand, her furtive glance, wouldn't let me rest. I felt sick with dread, torn between confronting her and keeping the peace. I wanted to run, to hide, to scream for help, but I stayed rooted to the spot, trapped by my own fear and disbelief as the evening wore on. I kept waiting for something to happen, for Emily to falter, for someone to notice, for the truth, too, come spilling out, but nothing did. The party wound down, guests began to leave, and still the secret hung between us like a storm cloud. I hugged my grandchildren goodnight, smiled for the last photos, and thanked everyone for coming, all the while feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. When the last guest had gone and the lights were dimmed, I found myself alone in the empty hall, my heart still pounding. I didn't know what Emily had intended or what would happen next. All I knew was that everything had changed and there was no going back. And as I gathered my things and stepped out into the cool night air, I realized that the real party, the one where secrets would finally be revealed, was only just beginning. The first sign that something was wrong came just as we were gathering for the final group photo. Emily, who had been standing near the edge of the crowd, suddenly pressed a hand to her forehead and swayed slightly. At first, I thought she might just be tired after all. She'd spent the whole evening bustling around, making sure everything was perfect, but then her face went pale and she clutched the back of a chair, her knuckles white. "Emily, Are you all right? Daniel asked, concern etched across his face as he rushed to her side. The room, which had been filled with laughter and chatter only moments before, felt eerily silent. All eyes turned to Emily as she tried to steady herself, her breathing shallow and quick. I don't know, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I feel dizzy, lightheaded. She looked at me, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, panic, confusion, maybe even fear. My stomach twisted. I wanted to reach out to comfort her, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Mark, always the practical one, sprang into action. Let's get her some water, he said, guiding her to a chair. Someone fetched a glass, and Daniel knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. The children, sensing the tension, huddled close to their parents, their eyes wide and uncertain. As Emily sipped the water, I watched her closely, searching her face for any sign of what she might have done, nor what she might be feeling now. Was this guilt? Was it fear of being found out? Or was it something more physical? A reaction to whatever she'd intended for me? The questions swirled in my mind, each one heavier than the last. The room buzzed with whispered speculation. Maybe she's just overwhelmed, someone suggested. It's been a long day, but others weren't so sure. I caught snippets of conversation. She barely ate anything. Did you see how pale she got? I felt the weight of every gaze shifting between Emily and me. Daniel's worry was palpable. Mom, did you notice anything strange? He asked, his voice low, as if he didn't want the others to hear. I hesitated, torn between the urge to protect him and the desperate need to finally speak the truth. My heart pounded as I weighed my options. If I told him what I'd seen, would he believe me? Or would it only drive a deeper wedge between us? Emily, meanwhile, seemed to be recovering, though her hand still trembled as she set the glass down. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine, and for a moment I saw the mask slip. There was something raw and vulnerable there, something that almost made me pity her. Almost. But then the questions started. Mark wanted to call a doctor, but Emily insisted she was fine, just tired. My sister-in-law, never one to miss a bit of drama, pulled me aside. Did you see what happened? She whispered, her eyes wide with curiosity. I shook my head, unable to find the words. How could I explain what I'd witnessed without sounding paranoid or vindictive? The tension in the room was suffocating. Daniel hovered protectively over Emily, shooting me anxious glances. I could feel the old loyalties shifting, the unspoken resentments bubbling to the surface. Some family members looked at me with suspicion, as if I'd somehow orchestrated this scene. Others seemed to sense that something deeper was at play. Their eyes filled with questions they were too polite to ask. I felt trapped, guilty for what had happened, afraid of what might come next, and desperate for the truth to finally come. Out I replayed the moment over and over in my mind. Emily's hand over my glass, the quick switch, the look on her face when she realized what I'd done. Was this karma? Justice? Or just a terrible, tragic accident? As the party broke up and guests began to leave, the air was thick with unease. Daniel helped Emily to the car, his arm around her waist, while I stood in the doorway, watching them go. I wanted to call out, to beg for honesty, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I was left with a gnawing sense of dread and 1,000 unanswered questions. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. I kept thinking about the look in Emily's eyes, the way the family had closed ranks around her, the way Daniel had looked at me, torn, uncertain, afraid. I knew that whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same. The truth was out there, hovering just beyond reach. I was terrified of what it might reveal. The morning after the party, I woke with a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake. The house was quiet, but my mind was anything but. I replayed every moment from the night before, searching for answers, for some way to make sense of what had happened. I knew I couldn't go on pretending. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. So I called Daniel and asked if I could come by. My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling. When I arrived, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of tea cradled in her hands. She looked up, startled, as I entered. Daniel hovered in the doorway, uncertain. I took a deep breath and asked if we could speak alone. Emily hesitated, then nodded, her eyes wary. Daniel left the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the weight of years pressing down on us, the unspoken resentments, the disappointments, the things we'd both tried so hard to ignore. Finally, I broke the silence. Emily, I saw what you did last night. I saw you put something in my drink. Her face went white, and for a second, I thought she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped, and she looked away. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she whispered. I wanted you to feel what I feel. Overlooked, unwelcome, like you're always on the outside, no matter how hard you try. Her words hit me like a punch. I'd spent years trying to bring her into the family to make her feel included, but somehow it had all gone wrong. Emily, I never wanted you to feel that way, I said, my voice breaking. I know I can be overbearing. I know I have strong opinions. But everything I did was out of love for Daniel, for the kids, for you. She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. It never felt like love. It felt like judgment. Like I could never measure up to your standards. I was so tired of feeling small, of feeling like I was always competing for Daniel's attention, for a place in this family. The pain in her voice was raw, and for the first time I saw her not as an adversary, but as a woman struggling to find her place. I wanted to reach out to comfort her, but I also felt a surge of anger. So you tried to hurt me, to prove a point. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. She wiped her eyes, her hands shaking. I just wanted you to back off. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I'm sorry. The room was thick with emotion, the air heavy with everything we'd left unsaid for years. I realized then that I had a choice. I could sweep this under the rug, protect the family's image, pretend nothing had happened. Or I could stand up for myself, for my own truth, and finally set some boundaries. I looked at Emily, really looked at her, and saw a woman as lost and afraid as I was. We can't go on like this, I said quietly. Something has to change for both of us. And in that moment, I knew I was done sacrificing my own well-being for the sake of keeping the peace. After that conversation with Emily, something inside me shifted. I left their house feeling lighter, but also strangely hollow, as if I'd finally set down a burden I'd been carrying for years. The truth was out, raw and exposed, and there was no way to tuck it neatly back into the shadows. I knew things would never return to the way they were, but for the first time, I was okay with that. In the days that followed, the family felt the tremors of our confrontation. Daniel called me, his voice thick with worry and confusion. He wanted to understand, to piece together what had happened between his wife and his mother. I told him the truth gently, but without hiding. I explained how I'd seen Emily at the party, how I'd switched the glasses, how I'd confronted her the next day. I could hear the pain in his silence, the way he struggled to process the reality of what his family had become. There were no easy answers. Daniel loved us both, and I knew he felt torn in ways I could never fully understand. But I also saw him begin to step up, to take responsibility for the emotional health of his own family. He started checking in more often, not just out of obligation, but out of genuine care. Our conversations, though sometimes awkward, became more honest. We talked about boundaries, about respect, about the ways we'd all failed each other, and the ways we could do better. Emily kept her distance for a while, and I respected that. I stopped trying to force closeness, stopped offering unsolicited advice or dropping by unannounced. Instead, I focused on my own healing. I joined a book club, started volunteering at the local library, and spent more time with friends who made me feel seen and valued. I realized how much of myself I'd lost in trying to hold the family together, and how freeing it was to finally let go the grandchildren, blissfully unaware of the adult drama swirling around them, continued to bring joy into my life. I cherished every moment with them, but I also learned to respect the boundaries Emily and Daniel set. I waited for invitations, asked before making plans. I found new ways to show my love that didn't involve overstepping. There were losses, to quiet, bittersweet ones. Family gatherings became smaller, more cautious. Some traditions faded, replaced by new ones that fit our changed reality. I missed the easy laughter, the sense of belonging I'd always craved. But I also felt a new sense of dignity. I was no longer willing to shrink myself or ignore my own needs for the sake of keeping the peace. Over time, Emily and I found a fragile truce. We were never going to be best friends, but we learned to coexist with a kind of mutual respect. She apologized again, this time with more sincerity. And I forgave her not because I had to, but because I wanted to free myself from the weight of resentment. We set clear boundaries, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. The family was different, now less perfect, perhaps, but more honest. I learned that sometimes the only way to heal is to let the truth come out. No matter how messy it is, I reclaimed my sense of self, my dignity, and my right to be treated with respect. And as I looked toward the future, I felt a quiet hope that even in the aftermath of betrayal, it was still possible to find peace. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to lose yourself in the pursuit of family harmony. For years, I ignored my own discomfort, brushed aside my intuition, and convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than speaking my truth. But the events of my retirement party forced me to confront a painful reality. Sometimes, the people we love most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to trust ourselves enough to act, even when it means risking everything we thought we knew. I've learned that trust isn't something you can force or fake. It's built slowly through honesty and respect, and it can be shattered in a single moment of betrayal. But I've also learned that my intuition is a gift, not a flaw. That uneasy feeling in my gut was my heart's way of protecting me, and I wish I'd listened to it sooner. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this: don't silence your instincts for the sake of appearances. If your well-being matters, you deserve to feel safe and valued in your own family. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you love your family any less. It means you love yourself enough to demand respect. It means you're willing to let go of old patterns, even if it's uncomfortable, and to choose honesty over illusion. I won't pretend it's easy. Are still days when I grieve the closeness I once imagined. But I also feel a new sense of freedom. It's a quiet pride in having stood up for myself when it mattered most. If you're facing your own family struggles, know that you're not alone. Trust your heart, honor your truth, and remember that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds. And if you think my story was dramatic, just wait until you hear what happened at my granddaughter's birthday party. But that, as they say, is a story for another day.